Welcome to the Service MVP Podcast. This is where you go to learn how to use pure motive service to create higher value to grow your results. And now, here is your host, America's service sales coach, Joe Crisara.
Welcome to the Service MVP Podcast. My name is Joe Crisara, America's service sales coach. And today we have a very special guest, a really great friend of mine who I met just a few years back. His name is Tim Brown from the Hook Agency in Minnesota. Tim, welcome to the show today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you, and there's never a bad time to have Tim Brown on your schedule because it always brings smiles and happiness and it brings value. So Tim embodies a lot of the concepts that I truly believe in, which is to create high value before you ask clients for money. His ideology for marketing is to show value first. If you're interested in that service, he will take it to the next level, and it's served him very well. He went from nobody to a somebody in this HVAC business very quickly. Tim, why don't we start with what inspired you or who inspired you to move to a different thing? Tell us a little bit about the history of Tim Brown and the Hook Agency and how you got started.
Yeah, so I worked for another agency originally I was making websites. Then I got to be a marketing director in 3-4 years out of college, which was sweet. But I always kind of had it in my mind that I was going to do my own thing. I got into the first niche I had. It's been contractors and home services, but roofing was my biggest thing. And so I guess what's partly inspired me to get into the thing is actually like competing with ourselves a little too much in different markets. And it felt a little claustrophobic. Hey, HVAC is a great business. It is, look at what is it, like 400 billion and, total market. There's a lot of opportunity. And I think I also like that there's a kind of a higher barrier to entry a little bit than roofing. So we pushed into it. A lot of people helped inspire that though, just talking to different people along the way, people that have already been in HVAC, and then, just our circumstances that we didn't want to have too many clients in certain areas. So it's kind of branching out a little bit to be able to not always be competing with ourselves so hard, that type of thing.
Well, I tell you what, the reason you embody a lot of the concepts I believe in is because you're not afraid to talk to people, to ask for help. Tell me a little bit about how that concept got started, because Tim, if you haven't noticed, if you want to look him up, you'll see he has talked to a who's who of people in the HVAC business and the contracting business, seemingly fearless to talk to anybody and try to provide value to those people. Tell us a little bit about the concept that you have where you started just to go out there. I met you at a conference where all of a sudden you're like, hey, we want to do an interview with me. And I'm like, what? And who is this guy? And I found the interview to be very professional. And I thought it was, he made some videos out of it and created a lot of value for me as a service provider. Tell us about how that concept got started, where you started going out and just meeting people and try to create value by creating little viral videos of them. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So it kind of comes down to like my motivation, right? Like once I fully understood that content marketing, particularly it's an influencer kind of content marketing, right? I'm like always like trying to get around people that have my ideal customers' attention. That's the thing, is like you figure out who has their attention, and then it's how can I be useful to them, and how can I create content that will showcase them, because they're the people that people want to see. It's kind of like a cast of characters. So when I come into HVAC, I'm saying, oh, wow, there's an interesting, rich, very cool, like cast of characters out here. It's kind of fun when you come into a new industry and you see that cast of characters, and then you're seeing how they interact. Some of them fight each other. That's fun. So, some of them have strong opinions. That's fun. Some of them, they haven't been asked questions the way we're doing it because we're kind of come at it from a new angle. And I think the biggest thing is a beginner's mindset in my case. Like I have a beginner's mindset, but I kind of know I've seen what works on social media. So I know provocative questions or try to pin people down. I think one of the ones I asked you that went kind of viral, I guess, is what HVAC unit would last 50 years. And then you said anything that's installed properly will last a good 25 years. And I was like, what about 50? And you're like, well, then you're going to need 2 of them. And you got to laugh from me in that moment. But I think the entertainment factor and we do a lot of man on the street type videos, but basically the motivation is like, I know attention leads to money. So if we're able to get attention, then eventually we'll get money. And so I just press the button as much as I can because I know that it does that. So I just gotta try to put myself in the middle of things. And I've had some people nudge me and like push me toward, like, I remember at one of the first Pantheon, what's the guy's name from LB Capital, that not Lance, but the other guy that hangs out with him. He was working.
I don't know. Oh, Bill Russell.
Bill Russell, super nice guy. Bill Russell was like, that's Ken Goodrich. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, the benefit of being new at that time is like, I don't have any pretense. You know what I mean? I'm not like intimidated because I don't care. That's the truth. I didn't care. So he just like, and he had a kind of a handling, a handler almost, and I just like went up and I'm like, hey, need to get you on our podcast. And he's like, he's super nice, but the boldness is just kind of has come a little bit from not caring that much a little bit. Cause I'm like, there's less pretense, but it's been fun because obviously we have a business that's been doing well, and I get the chance to go out to these events, and I have a business that's been taking care of us. So
let's go back to that beginner's mindset, which I call that the dummy curve. The dummy curve is when you start out doing something and you don't really know about it. You're forced to ask really good questions to learn about it. How do you think that service contractors would benefit from that mindset when they deal with their clients? You think that would be a parallel, Tim, that contractors would benefit if they were to, although they're very intelligent, and they probably one of the things that hurts them is that they are experts and they act like they know everything, as opposed to one thing I teach, which is to start with that beginner's mindset, or that dummy curve, I call it, to where you have to start every call like it's a brand new person, because we don't know about the people. We only know what we don't know, right? So tell us about how you think that could benefit contractors if they were to adopt that mindset as well.
That's such a great mindset, right? Because homeowners, or like sometimes I could just put on like, I am a real homeowner. You know what I mean? I'm a homeowner.
You are, yes, I get it.
I have light bulbs that I haven't put in myself. You know what I mean? Like I broke the top of or somebody broke the top of our toilet, but I could put myself in that mindset. Like, people don't know anything, right? They don't know anything about your thing. If you can care, right? We care. Like, if I'm talking to my daughter, like, she doesn't know anything, and that could be really annoying if she wasn't my daughter. I'd be like, God, why don't you just, you don't know how to eat that? You don't know how to eat that? Come on. Like, I have to spoon it to you, but like, as it's my daughter, I care about her. So caring deeply, I will take things down to her level and say it super simply and make it all, I mean, it's like all about her, right? And it's like, I'm not super worried about myself in those situations. So as you can get out of yourself, because that's the thing, as I think as a contractor or home service business, you don't really, it's boring to keep saying the same things over and over again, right? You're saying it for the 50th time. I've noticed that when I'm selling something, it gets boring to say all the things, but you know all the things to say. You just need to slow down and say it, right?
Yeah, I think it goes back to whenever you have an opportunity with somebody, that opportunity is not about you, the service provider. It's about learning about and caring about the client and getting them to the destination they're trying to go to, right? I think you embody that mindset. Like, in a way, you're a disruptor, because I think a lot of other marketing people come off like they're experts, or like they're positioning themselves as experts, trying to teach something to contractors, where you're different. The hook agency difference, I feel, is you start out by wanting to learn more about the contractor, learn more about the culture, learn more about their clients, and that kind of starting out with that beginner's mindset. And I think it leads you to creating a more customized solution. Am I off track on that? How would you feel about if I said that? Is that a fair statement?
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. I think there's also like, and just to like peel back the curtain on the wizard for a second, like if I think we have something here, there's always psychological quirks, right? With our customers. And sometimes you are learning the patterns, and then sometimes, frankly, you're exploiting something that you found that's awesome, like about how the way brains tick. And I know that it's exploit sounds bad, but the point is, like, I think we've found this pattern that essentially, like, for a contractor, and I'm just telling the truth, like I don't care if it like comes off weird. We found this pattern that, like, by being part of, rather than, because there's a lot of like ivory tower type marketing agencies that are kind of like talking from their ivory tower. We're part of, we're putting ourselves down in the situation. And that means to the point where sometimes I've been treated like an apprentice, on the job site. It's a good experience. It helps me empathize with not only the company, but the individuals doing the work. I think that being down in the trenches with people that's just a psychological quirk of all of us, that if we see somebody that's like, it's assimilation, that person's like part of the group now because he's seen this down in the trenches and he's been down in the trenches. So like I've been trying to, essentially, I know that's true. I know that we all operate like that. When we see somebody as part of our group, then they're just kind of in. And so for better, lack of a better word, and for being, super to the point, we've been exploiting that as it's like come available. But there's always those psychological quirks with your customers, right? What is that? I think to try to apply that here to homeowners, it's like, what is that for them? And I think, to me, community is a big one. We talk about like the company story as part of the sales pitch. If you make yourself part of the community and you're doing charitable things, you're doing things that are good for the community, and you're part of the community, then that kind of exploits the same part of the human brain in a good way. I think it allows somebody to consider you as part of them. And another one, sorry, I know I'm not the sales guru here, but I want to throw out one more that I really like, is go ahead. Yeah. The shrine in the home. Is like talking about, like, if there's a part of the house that, like, there's like the kids' pictures playing soccer, or there's a trophy or something like that. Like, what is that? Why is that important to them? And like kind of talking about the things in the shrine, like that is community and being part of, rather than the old talking down. Because we're talking about talking down to homeowners or talking down to anyone. It's never a pleasant experience.
Now, I'm going to call this podcast Tim Brown Using the Beginner's Mindset to Succeed. That's what we're going to call this podcast, because you masterfully do that. I remember, full disclosure, I did join Tim for a summit we went to together, and I joined the camera crew, and Tim coached me how to answer the Tim Brown questions. I ran around finding contractors and just hit them with a question that I was Tim Brown for about 90 minutes. Remember that, Tim?
Yeah, that was fun. It's fun.
It was a lot of fun. And you fed me the questions. I was fortunate enough to give you. He's like, just ask him what's the toughest challenge in the HVAC business. So I run up to people. I'm like, hey, excuse me, what's the toughest challenge in the HVAC industry right now? And then people would stop and be like, oh my God. So we'd surprise them. But we would do that kind of beginner's mindset. And I tell you, some of the answers we got literally astounded me. I was like, wow, that is really a thoughtful, responsive answer. And one thing that really surprises me, Tim, is the quality of the content you get from people. Maybe it's because you approach them at a time where they're not expecting like the interview. Like today, we're expecting this interview today. I tried to throw a few questions that you wouldn't have expected, hopefully. So you'd have to be the real you, right? But in a way, you're trying to get the real authentic person, right? How important is it, the authenticity of both the service provider as well as the client when you're trying to provide a service to them?
It's a great question.
I guess honesty. How important is honesty and authenticity when it comes to the way you provide your service and the way the client interacts with you, kind of inspiring that in both parties. This way we can have transparency and honesty in the conversation. What's the value of that, do you believe?
I think that it's definitely, it takes people off of their, we have kind of a natural protective mechanism with anyone selling us something, right? Like it's always like I want to be prepared just in case this salesperson tries to get me, right? Like that's definitely how people kind of perceive the sales process. And so we're working almost like you could be working against that if you come off almost too polished or too formulaic. So I think that there's a concept of a damaging admission in sales. I know you're a sales guy, so you probably know this, but like the damaging admission is like you say something that almost goes against what you're, like you may not need this new water heater for another 5 years. Like it could last that long. That's a damaging admission if I'm trying to sell them a water heater. But like, then you could say, but then whatever you say next after the damaging admission is going to cut through more than anything you've said yet.
Yeah. Like sometimes I'll say something like, Joe, is there a reason why you need a hot water system? It seems like it's working right now. Why don't you just keep the old one? And that kind of forces people to tell me why they need a new one. It's kind of like that beginner's mindset again. Like, you're here to provide a water heater. Why don't you just get started on the water heater? Well, let's first make sure the client is committed to it, because that's what I feel. I feel like the honesty element is getting people to break the pattern that they normally have and give a thoughtful response that makes them think, like, I can't use my normal pattern to answer this question. In a way, I've got to be more thoughtful in the response. Does that make sense, Tim? I think that thoughtfulness creates more honesty, I believe. What do you feel about that? Yeah.
I agree. And I think every once in a while when you say something, I believe just saying the truth, you know what I mean? Like the truth cuts through, right? Like, so if you have something that's a damaging admission or something but it builds trust to just be real. So I believe it's very, very important to be as real as you can be. I know that like you can't be in there, like if you're having a bad day, like being weepy or annoying, but it's, to the degree that you're able to be authentic, do it.
Well, here's what I can say. You come from a part of the country in Minnesota where it's the exact opposite of that, right? The way the culture operates in Minnesota is such a formulaic, like you say this, I say that, and they have their own language in Minnesota, and they talk in a certain rhythm and cadence and a pattern. We call it Minnesota nice, right? Where nobody wants to be rude, everyone wants to, and they talk about similar experiences they go through. So my question is this, I'm setting this up with a question. Where did you learn to break that pattern? And because it couldn't just happen for the interviews you do, and so, which are amazing. If you ever want to go follow Tim on TikTok or go look at his Facebook Reels, and you're going to be scrolling through there for hours because he's got unending supply of entertainment for you. So Tim does an amazing job with that. I recommend everybody does that. But how did you break that pattern? Because so many people in Minnesota, they'd rather take my right arm off before I start talking different than I normally do, right? So how did you, in that area where it's so different to do that concept, what inspired you in that area to kind of break from that pattern?
I moved to Texas.
Did you really?
For 5 years, yeah. No, but that's the real answer because it's not that elaborate, but it literally like does kind of break you a little bit as far because actually it was very uncomfortable, the directness that Texas operates in. And so I actually had to change. Now it's helped as I've come back to Minnesota and into culture. It's kind of like any change is actually good in that way. Like you see sometimes people from I know a guy from New York that moved down to Florida that does really well on sales because it's just different. So having a different communication pattern sometimes just cuts through for people, or accents. I mean, but there's like always an opportunity to use what you got. So if you are moving from one part of the country to a different, there's definitely opportunity there. But yeah, in my case, I moved away for a while and came back.
So when you came back, did you feel like you could see the old pattern and you then were able to operate with this new pattern? You kind of changed where it was less repetitive and more trying to find out more special information. Because the key thing is you ask people questions that inspire answers that I don't think that the person would have previously thought they were capable of giving, but only the question you asked made them think of the answer that way. Did you feel like it was a certain superpower and you were now comfortable with it after experiencing that time in Texas and going back?
I think the biggest thing I took from Texas and the communication styles down there is just the directness and not beating around the bush, right? We talk about the Minnesota pattern is it could be a little passive aggressive. That's the negative thing. It could be polite, which is a positive thing. Like it could be either, but like being a little less polite and a little bit more direct. And I think that, there's a quote that I really like about that, like offense is the price of clarity. Sometimes you have to risk a little bit of accidentally offending somebody if you want to say something accurately. I think that there is something true about that with sales. If you're thinking about an HVAC system or you're talking about a website, sometimes I just say your website sucks, but you already know that. You know what I mean? Like I'm cutting to the point because if we can't acknowledge like the facts here, it's going to be harder to get to a solution. And I'm not like telling them they have to buy something, but it's like, let's acknowledge the facts here. So I think like in a certain amount of like, you're going to sell less if you can't be honest about what sucks. You know what I mean? Like if you can't be honest about what's a problem and you're worried about offending them because they have an old system or something like that.
Well, you started out about 2 years ago in the HVAC business, would you say? Now you have gone from a newbie at that beginner's mindset, let's call it, because you were actually a beginner, but you kept that mindset going to where you have found a way to invite powerful people to hold your own conference in Minnesota. It's going to be in February. I'll be there in February as part of it. And of course, when Tim Brown asked me, would you want to do this? I'm like, you tell me how to jump and I'll say how high. I told him. It created so much value for Service MVP, and I highly recommend the Hook Agency and Tim Brown because he's never stopped creating value for all of us and all my clients too. Every client I've ever known that you worked with, you've always stayed ahead of the value curve, I call it. Tim, how does it feel now inviting all these people to Minnesota in the coldest part of the year and they still show up? It's going to be amazing that you're having people there. Tell me, what's that feel like to go from where you were to where you are now at this whole section?
It's not only going to be sold out, it's going to be packed. So it's
Awesome.
going to be pretty cool. I mean, it'll be like 80 people in here. It's going to be tight. It's feels very good. Bold move. Yeah. Winter, like it's the best coaches in the industry. And it's the best salespeople that I've ever seen in the industry. And there's probably a couple missing. I know that there's some other really amazing salespeople out there, but there's some heavy hitters. We got Ishmael Valdez. We got, Phil Fulaski. We've got Brett Buckley. Why do they have all the names start with the same letter? I don't know, but,
right. I don't know why.
And like, it's kind of a crazy, cool group. So it feels really good. And I'm hoping it goes well, but I think it is going to go well. I think it just comes down to how can we provide the most value while we're there. And, I think just have a good time. These things is like, it's always, you and I go to a lot of industry events, but not everyone does, right? Like, so my mindset is like, for the people they're only going to this event all year, how can we make it feel like they're part of a community and the community cares about them? You know what I mean? That's my mindset with this event is like, if we can make it feel like the community cares about them, and that's the only event that they went to all year, that might be like, you know what? HVAC is a cool place. This is a cool industry that cares about people and is like really giving back, like not to say that we have to do anything crazy, like, but just like making people feel comfortable. So that's what I'm like trying to do.
Well, Tim, first of all, thank you for doing this podcast with me. And definitely it's breezed by in just a very short period of time. I hope I did surprise you with some questions that you weren't expecting and caught you off guard a little bit, because you caught me off guard so many times. I'm glad that I may have caught you off guard this time as well. Tim, do you have any final thoughts for the HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and roofing contractors of the United States? Just some final thoughts that you want to share to give us the Tim Brown summary or wrap up, if you don't mind.
Marketing needs to listen, and you can actually improve your customer. You don't only just make marketing to attract customers. Good marketing can actually improve the customer experience by mirroring back to the customers that are excited about the company, what they're excited about. Like, let's say just by reading your Google reviews and what people actually authentically like about your company, using that stuff in your marketing to make it feel authentic and real, right? So if marketing can listen a little bit more and actually like take a beginner's mindset to what we're doing, we're going to actually be able to not only attract more customers, but actually improve the customer experience.
Well, Tim, thank you again for being here. And what I can tell everybody is Tim Brown and the Hook Agency is masterful at communicating what's in the heart of the ownership of the company to the clients, not just the technical part of it, but what's in your heart emotionally, and to make your customers feel like they're getting a hug from the whole company. And as a byproduct of that, Tim, I really feel that your service isn't just a marketing service, it's a culture building aspect that takes the brand that people like Dan Antonelli and the sales approach of people like Joe Crisara or Jason Walker, and it amplifies that in a way that the culture now supports everything. And you're kind of like the glue that kind of puts it all together. And I think everyone would benefit from your services. Even if you already use a marketing company, I think having Tim Brown do an audit, seeing if there's a missing piece or a blind spot the company may have. And I think Tim is always there to fill in those blind spots. So Tim, thank you for the service you provide the HVAC, plumbing, roofing, and electrical industries. I really appreciate you as a service provider. And you are I'm going to call you you have now won the award. I might have to bring it with me when I come to Minnesota. The Pure Motive Service Provider for Marketing. I would say that's Tim Brown. So you won that award for me, Tim.
I appreciate that. I'll take it. I'll put it up here on the shelf. And just to note, like you said, we absolutely do free audits for people, and we generally have a 1-day turnaround time for PPC, Google Ads audits, SEO audit, and or website audit. So any one of those things you can ask. We have a very official process. We'll get it back to you with a Loom video breaking it down and helping you improve those things, whether you work with us or not. Check me out on Facebook just by looking up Tim Hook, and we're Hook Agency all over social media and hookagency.com. And you can email me personally at tim@hookagency.com.
Thank you so much. Have a great one, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks, everybody.